Hello and welcome along to the Formbook, previewing all the action at Cheltenham on New Year's Day. Some interesting contenders in action, I guess, headlined by the likes of Tipstar and Bob Olinger. And we're going to preview the big races from Prestbury Park on January the 1st. Delighted to say, bringing in the new year with me will be Andy Stevens, of course, from Racing TV, and a Tipstar champion. That's what you really need. Fresh from tipping up Hewick in the King George, we've got Dan Overall with us. Dan, how are you?
Yeah, I was much better after Hewick somehow snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. That's one of those where I think this season I've had a few, like 1.01 shots turned over. And even though a lot of Shishkin backers felt aggrieved, it felt so good just to get one of those over the line. Like, he had absolutely no right to win, stormed home. And yeah, that made my Christmas a lot sweeter.
Andy, how's your Christmas been?
Well, it's the joy of racing, isn't it? I was just as Dan was getting excited, probably with Hewick coming with his incredible run. I had my hand in my face like that with Shishkin. You know, just when you think you've seen it all in racing, we get that. I think he would have won. There's been some speculation that he wouldn't have won. For me, he was just putting the stamp on the race, and but just thankfully he was okay. It looked a horrible incident, didn't it? Just for a moment there, but we'll get to see Shishkin and the next chapter of his story probably at Cheltenham in the Gold Cup.
Some fantastic action across the festive period. Plenty more to come on Racing TV. Let's see what's coming up then at Cheltenham at New Year's Day. Let's get straight in to the action. Before we begin, let me point you in the direction of the new Racing TV website. As you can see here, all singing, all dancing. You've got the likes of tips, news, race cards, results, free bets, members exclusive. There's a man who needs a shave giving selections for the action at Taunton and Haydock this afternoon. Plenty of video tips for you to enjoy. Plenty more tips beside that. You can also read all the latest news, get Dave Nevison's best bets, the latest from the Christmas period. Anything your heart desires. And of course, you can watch live racing on the website too. So make sure you do check out racingtv.com for all the latest, including a few key horses to follow and more. Plenty to enjoy on the website. So make sure you go and check it out. But let's have a look at the racing then. We're going to start with arguably what is the feature in terms of prize money. That's the Paddy Power New Year's Day Chase. Just the 6 declared. Stage Start, Owl Dancer, Richmond Lake, Shake 'em Up Harry, Frero Bamboo, and Torn and Frayed. Let's come to you first then, Dan. What do you make of the chances of Stage Star? Here's his win, of course, last time out in the Paddy Power.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's got a leading chance here. Obviously, his inclusion is interesting. They were kind of mulling over options for him after this win in the Paddy Power. Obviously, he needs to go left-handed, needs 2.5 miles, and there aren't an abundance of options for him. So they've ended up back in a handicap. And realistically, while some will be maybe off-put by top weight in what's likely to be heavy ground, I always prefer class over weight in these races, and I think he's just got a clear class edge over these. I mean, the manner of that victory, I thought, in November was very impressive, considering he didn't get an uncontested lead. He had the likes of the Real Whacker contesting for most of the race, jumped really well. In fact, out-jumped the Real Whacker, which hasn't often been done, especially when you look back at last season, put these rivals to bed fairly easily, and then overcame that very ludicrous mistake at the last to win a shade cosily in the end. We've seen Fugitive and Il Rodotto have franked that form since. It looks rock solid. And of his rivals, I don't necessarily see anything of the class that he has. And yeah, while he'll be a short price, I think he'll take a lot of beating here.
Okay, that's the thoughts from Dan on Stage Star. What about yourself, Andy? Couple more VTs of his. Of course, the Turn Novices Chase at the festival. First up.
Yeah, well, he's just gone from strength to strength, hasn't he? This was obviously at Cheltenham. He's running off 166 New Year's Day. It's refreshing, isn't it, to see such a good horse in a handicap. We don't see enough of that these days. It is a 100 grand race. There's only 2 of his rivals, running off their correct weights. And he should get a fairly well. I'm not sure he will get an uncontested lead. You've got Frero Bamboo. He's a horse that goes from the front to Stage Star. It's going to be tough, isn't it? 166, heavy ground with some competition for the lead. I think he probably is the most likely winner, but I don't think he should be around the even money mark. And I quite like Shake 'em Up Harry against him, getting £26. He's something of a tease, this horse. Backed him several times, and he looks like winning his races. Travels well, jumps well. Hasn't quite finished the job on several occasions, but I think in receipt of a lot of weight, I'd rather be with him at the price. I think he might be sort of 5-6 to 1, Stage Star even money. I'd have them closer together in the betting, and for that reason, I'd be with Shake 'em Up Harry, of course, owned by Harry Redknapp and got his name via a West Ham fan who used to season ticket holder at West Ham and used to shout "Shaker Marbury" all the time, and that's how he's got his name. I'd like to shake up the horse just a little bit more at the finish of his races, but this is him finishing third in the Magnus Plate again at the Cheltenham Festival. He's admirably consistent, and I just feel that he will win a big handicap. Also ran very well again last time in the Coral Gold Cup at Newbury. Didn't see out the trip. When he runs over 3 miles plus, he looks like he needs dropping back to 2.5. Sometimes over 2.5, you think, oh, he needs dropping back to 2 miles, maybe 2.25. I think one day it's all going to click for him, and hopefully that'll be New Year's Day.
The form of that race does look pretty good, though, from that Magnus Plate. I think in behind you had the likes of Iridoto. Fugitive, of course, was second. And another horse, he was well beaten on that occasion, Dan. But Frero Bamboo is another interesting contender in the contest. This was a third at Cheltenham. Of course, in the race between Iridoto and Fugitive. I know this race is quite sore for you, isn't it? Because you were on Iridoto. Sorry to bring up old memories.
Yeah, I just about got over that before you brought that back up. But in fact, in my notes, it's actually said that this horse helped to break my heart last time, because realistically, if he didn't run as keenly as he did against Iridoto would have held on. But there we go. And to be fair to Frero Bamboo, I think a change of tactics were required, because he had gone on a very long losing streak, which still continues. It's nearly 2 years now since his last win, but it's not really by any fault of his own. I thought a lot of last season he was campaigned over 2 miles and mainly on good ground, which just didn't suit. He's performed really well this season, up to 2.5 on soft ground. He's going to get his conditions here. It's just, again, a case he's out of the handicap and he's against probably some classier rivals than he is. He'll find a race down the line, but he's almost paying for his consistency in that his mark isn't really shifting. Again, as Andy said earlier, he is another pace angle. Whether they're really going to go hammer and tong with Stage Star here, I'm not sure, but he's another potential front runner, which if you are concerned about that for Stage Star, he would be the one to maybe shake him up at the head of the lead.
Another one to note is Richmond Lake, who had a good win at Aintree last time out. Andy, what do you make of the chances of him for Brian Hughes and Donald McCain?
Oh, I like him. I actually backed this horse anti-post for the Paddy Power Gold Cup, but they took smaller steps of him. This is an Aintree, which that was a bit of a scare for those who were running. But he was one of the. It was really, really bad deep ground this day at Aintree, and he was one of the few that actually coped with conditions. He's clearly going to need to jump better than that at Cheltenham. This will be his first look at Cheltenham. They kept him to flat tracks so far. This is the first time it's an undulating track. Has got a lot of ones against his name. Has gone up £8, as I say, for that Aintree win. I prefer if I'm having a bet at Cheltenham, I do prefer to have some course experience, and he hasn't got that Richmond Lake. But clearly, it's going to be deep ground, so you've got to respect him for that. Just on Stage Star as well, I think people saying, what's he doing here, running off 1.66 and a handicap, the Ryanair chase favourite. ASO won this race in 2019 off a high mark. He went on to be second in the Ryanair, and Formbook won off 1.52 in this race in 2006, and he went on to win the Ryanair. So there is a little bit of precedent there for Stage Star.
So that's the main protagonist. I'll just have a quick word on Our Dancer as well. This was the third, of course, in the Old Rome behind Jotois. There's also won a Grand Sefton on his CV. He'll be 11 though on New Year's Day. Dylan Johnston takes the ride. Sam Thomas, the trainer, he's 12-1, whilst Course and Distance winner Torn Afraid, he completes the field for the Twiston Davises at 20-1. Brief mention on him, Dan. Do you give Our Dancer any chance?
He's still on a career high mark. Obviously, I think this is almost third choice for Connections after they bypassed the Sefton. He was going to go to the Peterborough Chase. That was abandoned. I think he's got a bit to find. And really what that Old Rome form is worth, given all the fences that were doled off. In fact, the only horses that really come out and done well from that are the ones that finished borderline tailed off, like That's All Right, Gino. So I can't really take that form too literally. And on a career high mark, he wouldn't be for me. So
Stage Star for you, Dan?
Yeah. Obviously, it'll be a short price, but I think he's just got a class edge on these and should win.
And Andy, you are with?
It's like Mastermind. I've started, so I finish. I've started back in shaking my Barry, and I'm not going to carry. I'm going to keep carrying on until we get across the line. So I think if you bet in running, he'll definitely trade shorter, because I say he does tank for his races. It's whether he'll pass Stage Star up the hill. I think those two to fight out the finish.
Next up is the Relkeel. This is how they look. Just the forerunners. Bob Olinger, Brewing Up a Storm, Marie's Rock, and Strong Leader. Good to see some Irish representation, though, in the shape of Bob Olinger, who's got a decent enough record at Cheltenham. And it was a good performance, I thought, in the Liz Mullen. It showed on this occasion, Andy, that the fire does indeed still burn.
Yeah, this is a bit of swagger, wasn't there, again, about Bob Olinger here. Tanks through the races, squeezes through here with Rachel. And unlike last season, did roll up his sleeves a bit and found a bit more to get the job finished off. That's Zanny here, isn't it? That's just leading him there. And it looks like Zanny here is going to fend him off, and then Bob sticks his neck down and gets the job done. He's not the horse that he looked like being, is he, in the Ballymore, where, absolutely fantastic that day, and he's clearly had some issues, but has won 8 out of 13. We know he goes at Cheltenham, and this race is obviously cut up, and I think it's gonna fall quite nicely for him. I think Strong Leader will probably make the pace. He can sit in behind him. Marie's Rock, I just got some reservations about her. She can beat herself, regardless of the opposition. She lives on her nerves a little bit, I think, and can use up too much energy before and during races. So I do think Bob Olinger's got very solid prospects of winning here. Not the strongest renal, it has to be said.
Okay, you mentioned there the Ballymore. Dan, this was a good performance, wasn't it? I guess he's a Cheltenham Festival winner over fences and over hurdles. I guess you could argue the form of Liz Mullen's taken a couple of knocks. Home by the Lee was pretty disappointing, I thought, at Leopardstown over Christmas. But the manner of this performance, at one stage, really thought he was going to be a superstar, not forgetting he had the likes, of course, of Brave Man's Game in behind him on this occasion.
How things change so quickly in racing. I say the world was at his feet this day. Like, he was the next coming. He was going to be all sorts. And although he then got his Cheltenham Festival win next season in the Turners, obviously that was slightly controversial after it was in the process of being hammered by Galopin de Champs that day. And since then, it's just been a bit of a tale of woe, really. He's just not the horse he was. Obviously, it was good to see him get that win last time out, but really what that race is worth, as you allude to there, Danny, I wouldn't be all that sure. Obviously, Zanna here was second, and fair play to Bob. He would normally be one I wouldn't exactly trust in a finish, but did find a bit more on that occasion. But then again, Zanna here hasn't exactly been prolific in his career either recently. I mean, he was when coming into that race fit and having won, but it was a free runner race where nothing really had a chance that he was coming into that race off of. As you say, Home by the Lee was disappointing as well. I'm just getting to the point with Bob Olinger where I can't really trust him, especially when he's going to be a short price. Obviously, all the talent was there. He clearly hasn't got that now. And yeah, when you're just looking at Bob Olinger at a short price, I just fail to really want to back him at, given you say he's going to be probably market leader alongside Marie's Rock.
So who do you like then, Dan?
In all honesty, none of these. This is a complete no-bet race for me, I have to be honest. Like, I was hoping something would turn up from Willie's maybe. He had 3 entered. He had Ashro Diamond, Gala Marceau. Obviously, Lossie Mouth was in here, but obviously she would have had a lot to prove stamina-wise. None of them have come. Even something like Springwell Bay, I thought may come here instead of the 3 mile handicap and didn't. So, and you're looking at the Ollie Murphy horses. I mean, I thought Strong Leader completely threw the Ascot Hurdle away. Like, I thought he had that race absolutely sewn up. The step up in trip seemed to help it looked like it would on this occasion. Aintree obviously staying on from a very compromised position to rally really gamely. But I just hated the way he hung and jumped so poorly in the closing stages at Ascot. I couldn't trust him to, again, in a race like this. And Brewing Up a Storm's 11 and maybe just not up to this anymore. And as Andy said as well, Marie's Rock, she can just be a bit too buzzy. I think this is plan B for her. They were going to campaign her as a 3 miler. I don't think she had any excuses really on her seasonal reappearance, given she won this race last season fresh. I think it turned into a relative sprint last time out over 3 miles, and she just didn't pick up. Maybe she's just feeling the effects of obviously now being a 9-year-old. I think a really tough little race this, and yeah, one I wouldn't be getting massively stuck into for sure.
We've got plenty of VT of Marie's Rock, Andy. Let's start then last year with the Relkeel success, defending champion. But you've got your own concerns with her, have you?
Yeah, well, this was first time up last season, wasn't it, as well? And she was a big fancy for the Stayers Hurdle after this. She ended up going back to the Mares Hurdle, and disappointed. That was on soft ground as well. If you look at her form, the word good does sort of crop up in her best performances, and I'd be worried about the ground for her on New Year's Day, and also the way the race is run. I think she probably needs a decent gallop to help her settle. And she can get buzzy before the start. And there's always a big crowd there at Cheltenham New Year's Day. I think it was 28,000 last year. She's the kind of horse that might just react to that as well before the start. So I'd keep an eye on her. If you're there on the day, keep an eye on her in the paddock. Make sure she's not getting too buzzy there. She has good and bad days, doesn't she? She's just a little bit. I don't really like her inconsistency. I thought she'd had a leading chance here. This is the 3 mile at Newbury. Again, apparently she was a little bit on edge before the start. I watched her through the race. I thought she'd win it, but to me, she didn't really beat herself up during the race. But Nico de Bourneville come back afterwards and said that she was quite keen in her race. She's just plugging on one pace there for 4th. This is over 3 miles. They don't seem to be able to make their mind up, do they, trip-wise with her? If she's in the form she was in 12 months ago, clearly a leading chance. But she's just a little bit too in and out for me.
So who would you be with, Andy, if I force you to have a bet?
Well, you've got half the field is Ollie Murphy, as we mentioned. So good luck to him, and well done for declaring, for his pair. I'd be with Bob Olinger purely because I do think he will settle, he will travel, and that might just be enough on the day. He will cope with the soft, heavy ground as well. I think everything should all be in his comfort zone really on New Year's Day. I think if you, as Dan was alluding to, is this horse a little bit brittle now, a little bit fragile? But I think if he can do all things, under his own steam, which I think he will do at Cheltenham, he might just win on the bridle. We might say, wow, look at that. But so what he actually achieves might be two different things.
Okay, that's a look at the Relkeel. Next up is going to be the Paddy Power Handicap Chase. That's at 1:30. This is an interesting enough affair. Just the 5 runners, but a decent contest. Cloudy Glen, Stumptown, Angel's Breast, Inch House, and the Wolf. For me, Dan, it's all about Inch House. I've been really impressed with him. He's a strong traveller, and both of his wins at Newbury have been deeply impressive. We'll start with his win at the track in November.
Yeah, as you say, he's the progressive one coming into this. I mean, this race looked at the time very strong, and it's maybe not turned out to be as strong as I maybe thought it might have been, but still, you had to be impressed by the way he travelled through the race. Always looked the winner from a long way out on this occasion. I guess the concern we'd probably be having with him is that you can see it there, that tendency to look a bit awkward in a finish. Is he going to get away with that at a track like Cheltenham up the hill on heavy ground? That has to be a bit of an unknown for me on this occasion. Obviously, Newbury a bit flatter. And while it is obviously a long straight at Newbury, the Cheltenham will demand a bit more. And he did a very similar thing in December as well. I think you have to respect him as the up-and-coming Forces division. There should still be a bit more to come, but that would be a slight concern, as well as tackling an undulating track. So you go back to his Chase debut. That was an undulating track at Chepstow. Did make a couple of mistakes that day. Whether he just doesn't handle that over fences, time will tell. That was his Chase debut, so you can forgive it. But he does have a couple of questions to answer. But in a small field, he's clearly the most progressive and the one with the most upside.
Andy,
are you in agreement with Inch House? This is his win at Newbury in December.
Yeah, he was just looking for his mates in the crowd there, wasn't he? I don't know. He's only had 6 races. He might be just a little bit of immaturity there with him. Equally, he might be a little bit of a thinker, but he's clearly the one that's on the up. I think he's gone up £7 for that latest Newbury win, but he clearly, he's a horse that's on the up, and the others, we sort of know where we're at with them. I do like Cloudy Glen. I always thought he's a horse that's best fresh, and I was surprised. This was his first time up this season.
Second to Melina Gell.
Yeah, finished a good second here, didn't he? And then I didn't think I thought he'd bomb out in the Gold Cup, Coral Gold Cup at Newbury. But he actually did run very well from the front and finished sort of an admirable 5th or 6th in that. He's going to get his own way, I would say, on New Year's Day. But I fancy Inch House would come past him in the closing stages. He's a horse that generally, as the season goes on, he gets worse. So that's something to keep in mind.
One other that I definitely deserve a mention is the Kim Muir second, Stumptown, who's really lost his way, Dan, since that performance. He's really struggled to fire. But before that, but coming into the Kim Muir, he was one of those Irish horses that was really strongly fancied. Second, of course, on this occasion, in a good finish as well, behind Angel's Dawn.
Yeah, a real Irish-dominated race on this occasion. He was 7-2 favourite that day as well, having bolted up at Sandown on his previous start. I think this is off a mark 135, as he still finds himself a fair bit higher than on this occasion. And as you say, Danny, he just really has not progressed from there, as he pulled up in the Irish National, a couple of below-par performances at the start of the season. And then in the Coral Gold Cup, he was pretty well fancied on that occasion as well. He's backed into 9-1, seemed to be a bit of confidence behind him, lost his position very early, tried to set off prominent, and ended up almost in rear after a few fences. That would be a concern. It's not really a surprise they've reached for blinkers as a result. I think they're just trying to sweeten him up. Obviously, he does go well at Cheltenham, and the ground shouldn't pose an issue, but he has enough questions to answer at this stage. And when the blinkers go on, obviously, when we come to festival time, we're looking at first-time headgear as maybe a positive. I think on this occasion, it's just been a case of we need to spark some life back into him. And again, when you're looking at a rival like Inchhouse who's progressive, and you've got some maybe solid ones in here, I think he has some questions to answer, which others do not.
And just finally, we've also got the Wolf and Angel's Breath in this. Andy, I don't know if you want to mention any of the others, but Angel's Breath, here's his second at Cheltenham earlier on this term. This was, of course, over hurdles.
Yeah, well, this is a story of what might have been a really gifted young horse, and then best part of 3 years on the sidelines with a tendon injury. This was his comeback this season over hurdles, and I thought this would have teed him up nicely for the Paddy Power Gold Cup. I actually put him up anti-post for that, and his odds did shrink, and I was I got half of it right, but then come the race, he got lost from halfway. Really, his jumping sort of fell apart and faded. I can sort of half see why they're going up in trip here. This would give him certainly time to measure his fences a bit more, and they'll probably go a bit of a slower tempo. Equally, I'm not sure that he's crying out for a stamina test like this. So he has been dropped £5 for the Paddy Power Gold Cup. The handicapper is dropping horses more in chunks these days, so he's well in on his old form. It's interesting that he's going 3 miles. If he gets in some kind of rhythm, I suppose you give him a chance. I can't, after the Paddy Power Gold Cup, I can't quite see it.
Okay, so Inchhouse for both of you guys, Dan?
Yeah, he would be my selection.
And Andy, you with Inchhouse as well?
Yeah, sorry, probably favourite, but there we are. He's the improver of the field.
Well, it's not going to win because I'll complete the hat trick. Inchhouse my nap for the day. So there we go. Next race is an interesting one, I think. One of the most interesting on the card. £35,000 Paddy Power Handicap Hurdle. I think this is pretty competitive. You've got some interesting contenders in this. I guess we'll start with Ed Keeper, Dan, who was a good winner at Newbury last time out and represents Sam Twiston-Davis and Sam Thomas in those familiar Dye Waters colours.
Yeah, I really like this performance. Obviously, Holy Smoker horse in second was one of my winless ones to watch list. I was very keen on him this day. He was well backed. He'd been crying out for 3 miles. And to be fair, Ed Keeper has won very, very cosily. Real galloping sort. So I think the new course on heavy ground is really going to suit him. The horse in third there, Highland, obviously won his last 2, including a race at Cheltenham. So I think that's really solid form for this level. Just an awful lot to like. I mean, I remember when they did a stable tour with Sam Thomas going into the Coral Gold Cup meeting. Obviously, they were previewing his 2 runners in that race primarily. But he mentioned this horse as a horse that hopefully, in a couple of years' time, is competing in a race like the Coral Gold Cup. So they think a lot of him. He justified that on that occasion. Still a lot of upside with him. I don't think the soft ground's going to be any issue. He just looks a real remorseless galloping type. Yeah, a lot to like about him. I'd be quite strong on his chances.
Okay, that's Dan on Ed Keeper. Are you in similar vein, Andy, with Ed Keeper?
Yeah, no, I'd echo all of that. I mean, I haven't seen him in the flesh, that horse, but just looking at the VT, he's a big stamp of a horse, isn't he? I think they're already must be looking forward to chasing next season with him. That was only his fifth run at Newbury, and his first over the 3 miles. Clearly relished it, and as Dan says, that form was very, very strong. Improver in second, and the third won the Potemps qualifier. I've beat 20 rivals at Cheltenham the time before, so there's some solidity there to that form, and I wouldn't be in a rush to oppose him.
Okay, both of you then are the chances of Ed Keeper. What about Butch, who's got a good bit of form at Cheltenham over the course? James Bowen and Ollie Murphy team up here, Andy.
Yeah, this was gutsy, wasn't it? You just wonder about his handicap mark, really. He certainly you wouldn't question his resolution. He's on the inside there. Looks like he's going to get beat. And Sam Twister on him wasn't in this day, and gets him back up again in the closing stages there. So certainly wouldn't go eyeball him in the closing stages, because he does look like he's a horse that will pull out a bit more for you. But I just wonder if he's high enough in the weights, really. And as I say, he's a novice, isn't he, again? So we'll see. I'd rather be a Ed Keeper of the 2. I think he had a bit more of I think we know a bit more where we are with that horse.
Springwell Bay, Dan, you mentioned earlier, is potentially maybe of going for the Relkeel, but he ends up here. He's got to carry 12 stone for John Drew O'Neill and his dad. This was the win, of course, at Cheltenham last time out. Yeah,
and he did this as he liked, really. He was quite well backed. I mean, I don't think it was necessarily a great race by Cheltenham Handicap hurdle standards. He was a clear class pick if you look back at what he'd done as a novice. And yeah, he won a shade cosily in the end. He still perhaps isn't giving his all there at the finish, but I think he won with a fair bit in hand. And interestingly, after the race, I think the reason they're coming here, maybe instead of the Relkeel, is because they just want to test his 3-mile stamina. They mentioned they might look at him as a stayers hurdle horse, so they're really going to find this out. I guess it is a step up this into, I'd say, a deeper race and unknown in terms of his stamina. Is going to be interesting, but they always thought the world of this horse. I think after he won his bumper at Market Raisin, he was thought of as maybe a top hurdler in the making. Didn't really set the world alight as it may have been hoped, but still a lot of good signs last season. Or you could excuse his run in the Mersey at Aintree. He just didn't really jump with fluency that day. Still looked to be learning. Got hampered at a crucial stage as well. Still has plenty of upside, but 12 stone, heavy ground, first attempt at 3 miles, all would be question marks to me. But I mean, if they're thinking of him as a stayers hurdle contender, then he should be going close here. But yeah, I'd say I'd prefer the guaranteed stamina of Ed Keeper.
Brief word on a couple of others. The newest one was second to Buddy 1 last time out. Did you give this horse any chance, Andy?
Oh, he's a dour stayer. That's absolutely certain. I think he was flattered this time. I think Buddy 1 was just playing with him a little bit in front, but he does keep on well here, doesn't he? And since then, he's gone to Chepstow and dotted up there, made the most of what was a relatively straightforward opportunity. He has. I think he's gone up £6 or £7 for this, though, and certainly wasn't spared an easy time of it, even though the winner was always going to hold him off. He should run well because he will see out every yard, and he's a confirmed mudlark. And I think come the day there won't be too many horses finishing their race off. So I can see him running well. I don't think he's got the scope of a keeper.
And just finally, Dan, come on, Teddy. We're going back a couple of years here. Well, it'll be 3 years on January the 1st, but this was the third in the attempt.
Yeah, you say we're going back a fair way to find some form to give him a chance. And he's still off a mark. I think it's harsh enough. Obviously, he made his reappearance in November in that Buddy 1 race. Shaped well enough. That was off 132, despite being beaten 23 lengths. And given the handicap has been fairly generous in recent times of giving these horses who are maybe a bit exposed or coming back off injuries a bit of leniency, he hasn't really shown him any. He remains on the same mark. Has to improve markedly to be competitive here. I think he may be one to pop up down the line once his mark gets lowered a bit.
So both the guys are keen on Ed Keeper in this contest. So we'll move on to the 12.55 final race we're going to look at. This is the Close Brothers Novices Limited Handicap Chase. And they differ here. So why don't we go to you first, Andy? You can make your case for...
Matata, isn't it? Well, yes, indeed. I mean, they might not see which way he goes. This horse he's your headstrong, exuberant front runner. Could be quite a sight to behold at Cheltenham. It has to be said. I hope he just flies the first 3 fences without any issues. I'd like to see him relax a little bit more, but clearly, I mean, you see him here. This is at the end of the race, and he's still trying to charge away with Darryl Jacob. He does this at the start. It's going to be all action with Matata. They actually had him in at Southwell in a really valuable handicap hurdle again on New Year's Day as well. And I thought he'd have been interesting for that. It's worth a lot more money than this race at Cheltenham. But clearly they've set their sights on fences with him. I think he'll take plenty of catching, hopefully.
Okay, so that's Matata then for Andy. Dan, you are with...
Yeah, I'm with Fine Casting here. And like Andy, obviously Matata has to be respected based on what he's done, but he's just very, very keen. And if it's going to get heavy on a relatively stiff test in a finish, is he going to too much too soon would be my concern, especially given the hefty rise in the weights he got for his win previously. Fine Casting, on the other hand, we know is a real heavy ground specialist. That's always all his best form comes. I thought there's a lot to like about his chase debut. Obviously, here at Haydock, that was soft ground as well. So you know that's, if you're going through Haydock, soft and heavy ground, get you handle conditions here, no problem whatsoever. His chase debut, I thought a lot to like at Fosslas. That was over an intermediate trip. I just thought he looked in need of it on that occasion. And maybe isn't a thorough stayer at those trips either. I mean, he could just be the type who wants heavy ground 2 miles. I mean, you go back to the Imperial Cup. He was 4th in the Imperial Cup of 129 on that occasion. That was heavy ground, really good run. He's actually £3 lower now than he was on that occasion. Only his second start of the fences. And I think of his rivals, I think Petit Tonnerre will be popular based on his couple of runs previously, but I just think he flatters to deceive a little bit. I think he'll go off relatively short based on what he's actually done. And we had a lot of opportunities in handicap hurdles last season without really delivering. He now needs to go and prove he's up to winning a race off this kind of mark. I say Matata will be the one I respect, but my concern is if he does too much too soon. And if he does, I think with Fine Casting, given he has a short stamina for a bit further, he'll relish conditions. I think he'll take a step forward for that chase debut. And I think, bearing in mind, there's only about 4 runners in here with a chance because the 5th is about £43 out of the handicap. He's the outsider of those four, and I think that maybe underestimates his chances.
Okay, that's down with fine casting. I'm going to be with Liberty Hunter. I'm going to take a chance this one. Love this ping as well at the second half. Go on, up you go. Lovely performance for Adam Wedge and Evan Williams. And I just thought there was plenty to like about this effort. Okay, the form might not stack up that well, but he's won as he liked. Goes up £10 for this victory, but proven on soft ground. And maybe there could be more to come from Liberty Hunter in what is another intriguing little betting contest. But Evan Williams, not in fantastic form. 2 winners from 22 in the last fortnight, just 9%. But his horses, we know, love a bit of cutting the ground. So that's a look then at the big 5 races. Come back to the guys then finally for their naps of the day. So Andy, let's start with you. Who are we following you in with?
Bob, I've napped Bob Olinger on the day. I do think he'll win. I think he'll win pretty cosy as well. And I'll probably stick in Matata as the next best. Do respect Dan's fine casting. I thought he was the one for the forecast. You probably heard as well while Dan was speaking. The dog was barking. He was actually tipping Petit Tonnerre just in case that we haven't tipped the winner in that race.
So that's Bob Olinger then for Andy and Dan. Your nap of the day is going to be
probably the most competitive race of the day, I'll argue, the 240, but I really like the chances of Ed Keeper. I think he's a staying hurdler, going places, and even next season, I'm really looking forward to seeing him over a fence.
Okay, that's Ed Keeper then for Dan, and I'm going to take a chance with, well, not a chance, Inch House for me in that 130, firmly on the upgrade, and hopefully plenty more to come. Well, that's a look ahead then to all the action on New Year's Day at Cheltenham. Make sure you watch all the action live on Racing TV, competitive card to enjoy. Thanks very much to you, Dan, for your debut. Look forward to having you on again soon.
Yeah, no worries at all, mate. Pleasure having me on. Thank you very much.
And thanks to you, Andy. Hope you have a good New Year and you not too much of a hangover on New Year's Day. I'm sure a professional
thanks,
like
Danny.
you
Yeah, we'll all be alive and well. I'll just throw in one at Musselburgh as well. 145 Caithness, Lucinda Russell, charge off, make all. Just another one. Just another one in the mix there. The more tips we can throw in, the more chance we've got of a winner, haven't we?
Even more than you bargained for. Well, thanks very much for your company. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll probably be back in January for a look at either the Clarence House Chase Day or Festival Trials Day. Happy New Year. Enjoy all the action. And just remember to gamble responsibly.